Hey there, everybody. This is Ceri, and welcome back to another episode of Unleashed. Today, I have with me life coach and former special education teacher, just like me, Ceri Payne. I'm going to turn it straight over to her and let her. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna tell you all something first. It's my birthday today. So Ceri's here with me on my birthday, and that's a really fun way to celebrate my birthday. And I'm totally wearing a pajama shirt. I told her that too, because it just makes me happy. It says, living my best life. And I just wanted to feel like I was living my best life today. So yes, I'm wearing my pajamas with real pants and real shoes, of course. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ceri. Could you tell us what a life coach is and what do you do in your practice?
Yeah, so as a life coach in my practice, what I do is I identify goals and priorities in life, and I just help the people that I work with really plan their schedules. I help them create time. I help them work on focusing skills and just really allow them to develop plans and the confidence so that they can reach their goals and so that they can start living the life that they are currently only wishing that they were able to live.
I'm also in the confidence business. I help teens build confidence so they can live a life they love. And we live in the world of niches, right? So you kind of tend towards a specific niche when you're helping your clients.
A lot of my clients are like the entrepreneurs or the mompreneurs is kind of what we call them. So they're growing a business and, being a mom on the side. But I kind of have landed into this lovely little extra niche that with ADHD. So a lot of these mompreneurs, these entrepreneurs, they're very creative minded. And that creative mind sometimes has the diagnosis with ADHD and sometimes it doesn't, but it's so creative, they act very much the same. And so it's really fun that I get to mold my passion of special education in that ADHD world with helping these mompreneurs create time.
Yeah, my audience hears this from me all the time, but I am always reading stats that say like 60% of entrepreneurs are ADHD or have ADHD-like symptoms. I've seen stats that go all the way up to 100%. Because also like just because you have the label ADHD can mean a very different thing depending on how you got diagnosed and the story that you're bringing and and the things we see that we call ADHD aren't even always ADHD. But that's why we see variety in that stat. But I think especially now in our world of so much information coming at us and our need to respond to it immediately and just so many demands, especially on moms who are also running businesses, like who doesn't feel like they have a little bit of, I can't keep track of what I'm supposed to do right now going on?
For sure. Yes. Whether we have it or not.
Do you help people remember to cook or eat the breakfast that they cooked? Because I forget all the time. I make my breakfast and then I forget to eat it.
I do that with my husband all the time, And we're like, be like, did you warm it up? Okay, now go get it. Set 2 alarms, one to go get the breakfast that put it in the microwave and then the next or lunch. I guess it's really his lunch at work. And then another one like 2 minutes later to actually get it out of the microwave because he does leave it there quite often.
Yeah. So, what did your journey look like? You were a special education teacher, as was I, and now you're a life coach. Like, what happened?
What happened? Life happened, right? No, so basically I was a special education teacher, like I told you, and I did work with all of those different kind of disabilities, but most of the disabilities had a core mobility where they had an ADHD or an ADD type diagnosis. But I had always been really fond of counseling and just the psychology type world. And so I thought maybe that would be my direction one day, but I had 3 kids in 3 years in 3 different states. And so I just didn't feel like it was right for me to head back to school to go get a degree in psychology. And so when I heard about the life coaching opportunity, and had the opportunity to be certified, of course, I took the chance because I was able to teach school for full time and still be certified as a life coach, which took about 6 months and a 6-day in-person, really intensive training, and then followed by another 6 months of some business entrepreneurial type track. So I think it was always that counseling therapy type world was always something I really wanted to do. When it wasn't presented in the life coaching package, and when it was, I jumped all over it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like growing up, I was really interested in, I used to say I wanted to be like a child psychologist or maybe even family law. I considered
Me
getting
too. Mine was law or yes, law or PhD. That was just my
yeah,
husband. He knew that's what I was going to do. Yes.
that's so funny. We had no idea that we had these similarities. I
I
think you and I
know.
had like a brief conversation over Facebook Messenger because I heard you on a podcast.
Who
So
knew? We
we're
were like the same mold. Yeah, and
yeah.
you're a special education teacher, so that's awesome too.
Yeah. And I thought about doing like getting a master's in social work.
Mhm.
Um, and I just kind of fell into teaching accidentally with a volunteer position I had.
Okay, seriously, me too. Like, I mean, I went to school for it, but I never thought I was going to do it. I was going to get my master's in counseling. Then I got married. My husband got accepted to a master's of counseling program. So I stopped to teach school so that he could go do that. But I didn't ever think, like, I was just on that track. I'm like, I'll just hurry up and finish college and then go get my master's. So it
That's
seemed
so funny. Mine was the opposite. So I was going to school for essentially like what was pre-law. It was sociology with a concentration in legal studies. Then I started, and there were supposed to be some like other poli-sci, obviously, and whatever that I had to take. I fell in love too much with sociology, so I didn't go down the law route, just within the sociology department, I guess, the legal studies concentration. And then I did this volunteer placement when my first college summer where I was teaching summer school in Baltimore City, and I loved it. But it didn't register still that I was going to be a teacher. So my whole undergrad experience had nothing to do with teaching per se. And I taught while I got certified and got my master's and all of that. But, that's neither here nor there.
right.
Just funny similarities in our
I know,
story.
it's crazy.
So we got off track. You were teaching special education, got certified as a life coach, and you liked the way that it was presented in a life coach package as opposed to in like a more clinical setting. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just because I had the kids and I just had such the young kids and I had them so close. By this time, they were older, like probably 8 and 10 and 12 or something like that. But I just liked the way that I could do that and still keep my day job. It wasn't a bazillions of, I mean, it was very expensive, but not law school expensive. And so by that time, I think my oldest was probably 14, and I thought I should probably be saving that money for her college education because I already had a master's. So I'm like, I have a degree. It was more of just some of those thoughts around she needs to have the money, not me, as far as going to college. So anyways, when I had the opportunity, that's where I went with it because it allowed me to kind of hit all those things, price points, the time point, all of the things I was able to do, plus the ending, which is really what I wanted, the result of being to help people up level their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the way that as a life coach or some other kind of coach, I feel like you have a little more freedom to come at it the way you want. Where if you're in like a more clinical setting, and obviously I'm not trained in this, but like you have less freedom as towards your approach and who you help and how you help them.
Yeah. Maybe I think it's all what we think about it, but I do know there are a lot of like certified clinical therapists or certified social workers or whatever, all of those people that can do some kind of therapy. They tend to get their certification in the life coaching world now. It's kind of like a little trend, at least where the circle that I run in, just because I think they don't have some of those legalities and some of the insurance things and some of those battles. So that in that way, I think it does provide them a little bit of freedom.
Oh, I never thought about it that way. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. But I've seen that trend as well. I've spoken to a lot of people who are therapists who are now life coaches. So did you stop teaching or are you still teaching?
I stopped teaching this year. So I did them both simultaneously for a couple of years. And so this year I did stop teaching so that I could work just full time in my business.
Wow, what a year to stop teaching.
I know. Well, I was an online school teacher. So I taught special education for our local district, but they were a homeschool population. So the last 5 years I spent teaching online. So part of me is like, oh my gosh, would have been my year to like help all the other teachers know, like, this is how you do it online. But they figured.
Oh, that's really great. Our special education teachers here are really struggling with how to help out their kids.
Yes, I could tell you, and how to have the IEP meeting and all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's great you had that skill set. That could have been like a whole new business all of a sudden overnight.
Could have been for sure. We'll see how long this goes. Maybe it will be.
Let's hope it doesn't go too long.
I know.
So, what about your personal experiences with ADHD? Anyone outside of your students or including your students? Anyone in your life? Oh, well, I guess, and including your clients.
Yeah, so of course I have a child with ADHD as well as a husband. And then of course the special education world, a lot of that I've dealt with. And now I think I told you I work with my clients now, many whom have it. And what I've noticed for them, the most difficult challenge for probably anyone, but it's discovering like our true priorities and then setting goals from those priorities and defining the action steps and then taking actions that we need. And so that is the main thing, is like helping them really find the action steps. So as I mentioned, like that ADHD brain, you said that entrepreneurs are very much likely to have it. I think it's because their brain is fantastically creative and they can dream up these most amazing ideas and just these projects and these goals. But then they, of course, they struggle to stay focused on defining that little action steps they need to see the project through. And so that's kind of where my passion is allowing their amazing brain to really do its thing in the world. And then I can kind of come up behind them and help keep that amazingness going.
Oh, that resonates with me so much. I was just speaking to my mastermind group this morning about like I have, even in the classroom, I had great ideas, but my implementation was awful.
Right. Right. And I'd love to really boost that confidence in my ADHD type clients. So I don't like speak badly of myself very often, but I like to be like, you know what? I'm that type A personality, everything ducks in a row. And I'm like, who wants to live in that world too? Right? Like we need both. So I'm like, I love that my job is to allow your creativity to come out. Cause I have creativity, but in a different way. And I have inhibitions and really like stifle myself more so because of that practical brain, as if you want to call it that. So I really love that when that creativity can meet their person, that allows them to then really organize it so that their creativity can just take off.
Oh, that just sounds wonderful. And you're so right in those actions. That's how I empower my students. I don't start with the vision because I work with teens and a lot of them just don't know how to make a vision yet. They don't have enough context of the world. And not to mention, by the time they work with me, they feel like crap about themselves. So I help them rebuild self-trust by setting small actions. I call them wins. They repeat them, they track them, they add on more, and I'm teaching them different kinds of wins, but they get to choose what they want really ultimately, because that's what makes them feel good. And it's all about taking action, doing the action, and then believing in yourself because you're now doing the things you said you were going to do.
Yes, exactly. We could have just like swapped like Instagram posts right there.
Awesome. Who knew we had like the same brain, or at least half of the same brain?
Right. You have the more creative too, right? You have a ball.
Yeah. And I'm great at helping others with their actions, but I have a really hard time implementing my own and like seeing how they all fit together to get to my end goal is where I struggle.
Right. Well, because you have your little brain inside going, that's too hard. You can't do that. That was silly. That, that negative self-talk that we just all naturally have.
Yeah.
And so that comes to play. But when you see your students, you believe in them so much that that stuff doesn't come up for you. That's their job, right? That's their brain's job. Your brain is to show them how it's possible.
Yeah. And then how do you take what you know from special education and working with your clients and apply it to your own family? Because sometimes my husband's ADHD, my kids are pretty young, so who knows, but sometimes it's hard to bridge the gap of, okay, you're my husband, you're my family, not my clients or not my students. What is that like for you?
It goes back and forth between easy and hard, right? Because I have the life coaching skills to be able to let people be who they want to be. But then, of course, I'm like, oh, I can help you do that so much better. But for me, it's just realizing like my place isn't to judge that they can be better or want to be better. But if they want to come to me and ask, then of course I'm totally willing to help them with that. But really just for my daughter, right? She's 15, but just like kind of putting in the implementations as a parent of my expectations, my rules and goals and what we want to do. And then just kind of letting her then figure it out of how it needs to happen and how it's needs to work, and then just allowing her to sit down and be like, hey, what's not working? Do you want help with that? Can you figure it out? And whether sometimes she says yes, sometimes she says no, but just allowing them their own journey to figure it out.
The journey is so important.
Yeah.
You totally had me at the beginning of that when you said that you have the skills to let people be who they want to be. And that is so important. I think as adults, especially when we're talking about our teens and our young people, whether it's our own children or our students, we as adults want to control them in a sense. We want to make them who we think they should be, and we want to tell them the process we think they should use. And of course, they don't want to hear any of that. And it just, it sets us up for a lot of frustration and arguments and naggings and fights and conflicts and all this yucky stuff that I think if we could, support our students or our kids in their own process, and they might stumble a little bit along the way, but you know what? Don't you think that you're stumbling now by telling them to do all these things that they don't want to do? That looks like a lot of stumbling to me if there's conflict involved.
Right. I agree for sure.
Yeah. So what are the couple of most important things that you teach it can be your clients, your students, your family? Like, what are your pillars of success, if you will?
Yeah. So I'm huge on priorities. So I really help people find the time that they think that they're lacking. And that's usually just because we have those thoughts that we don't have enough time. So I help them create schedules and streamline to just find the time to develop the schedules, but also the motivation, the tactics, the focus, and just believing in themselves, like having that confidence they can do that. Because lots of times we've been telling ourselves a story like, because of my ADHD, I can't do X, Y, and Z, or I'm not very good at X, Y, and Z. And so I just allow them, let's eliminate that and use it as like, I can do these things, it just may be difficult, or I can do these things, I'm just going to have to implement it a different way. And so that starts with by determining the priorities, as I mentioned. And that's something maybe you could do with, even the teen client. But as you had mentioned, it's hard for them to see life outside of just like what's right in front of them. So that's where priorities are kind of amazing, because it is life right there. Of course, it gets you the big goal, but what's really important to you? So we could start by asking them some questions like, what is important to you? What do you enjoy? What do you want to accomplish? Maybe even, as you said, it's a day to be happy and wear your shirts, like what creates happiness for you? And so if you use those types of questions, and the clients can really come up with their priority. And those priorities are often in the areas of like, for the older, I don't work with a ton. I do work with teens, but not a ton around this. It's more around anxiety and, depression and things like that. But it's usually their health, their relationships. At this age, it may be some academics. It may be some spirituality, or just their happiness or work or career, or just kind of whatever. But I really help them take time to identify their priorities. Then a fun thing that I love to take all my clients through is asking them to list the top 5 ways they spend their time each day. And the beauty of this is those lists, when you compare them, they rarely align. And so then they're very shocked, right, of why they can't accomplish this or why they're not getting this done. And you're like, well, look at your list. You don't even spend time doing it. So it's like they don't put grades on there or doing homework or whatever. They say grades are a priority, but then they don't spend a lot of time doing their homework. And then maybe if their grades are less than they want them to be and they're complaining and it's like, well, right there's the proof, right? You're not spending a lot of time in your homework. And a lot of it also is just they should be doing. Like, I should be getting good grades because my parents want me to. So I'm going to put that as my shoulds, or I'm going to put it as my priority, but I don't really care. So of course I'm not spending time on it. So we really kind of hash out those shoulds. And then of course, then we just kind of determine the why, because that's really important. It may say that you want to get a good grades because you want to go to college, but when you ask why, is it because they truly want to go to college, or is it because like my parents think I should? And if they're not college bound, then that's not really a priority for them in the way that their actions every day aren't going to really line up for that. Like, they're not going to show that it's a priority, because really in their mind, they're thinking, I might not go to college, or I might not be college bound. And so once they get their whys, they get the priorities, then that's when we define those action steps that they're going to do daily. And that's what then allows their success, because they know exactly what they want to be doing. And those action steps are then what goes like on the calendar.
Those are excellent questions that you started off with. I'm going to drop those in the show notes. I often ask my kids, what do you want more of in life? And what do you want less of in life? And we kind of start there.
Yeah.
And then after I get them on those winning streaks, that's when we start to do the more vision making and the priorities, is kind of how my system works.
I love your questions as well. Those are awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That just sounds like a really great system. And I was thinking about, like, we talk about the stories that we tell to ourselves, or the stories that we listen about ourselves from others. And I think your system fuels like looking at those stories and deciding, is this really me? Is this really my idea? And sometimes you might, break up with a story, just using your example, that the parents want me to go to college. You might break up with that story, but then you might rediscover for yourself that this truly is what you want to do.
Yes, and then you stop blaming the parents that they want you to do everything. It's like, wait, I want this too.
Yeah. And, I can see parents sitting here with what you're saying, just the particular example that you choose, like, oh, my child has to go to college. I don't want them thinking they shouldn't. But really, if that's your story, mom and dad, the kids need a chance to make it their own. Let them break up with that story of your expectation and switch it to their own expectation. Because I think more kids would probably do that than we might expect.
Right. But when they think it's you and they want to be, lots of times, unfortunately, kids want to be the exact opposite of their parents. And maybe they're not thinking that in their heads, but when we say something, they want to do the exact opposite, just to, I don't know, demonstrate independence or authority, or maybe they just hate us. I don't really know exactly what it is. And I don't know that it's a conscious decision. So if they see that that's something we find important, they may just rebel against it just because of that natural teen brain.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of nice for them to really develop that desire in themselves for them. So you're not using, because they can even use the parents as like a crutch. Like, so if they didn't do well enough, it's like, well, I didn't really want to go. My parents just wanted me to. And so they're allowing the parent to actually be the blame if they don't succeed as well. So it's really fun for them to go after what they want. And because they know why they want it, I think they're way more motivated to do it.
Yeah. And the teen brain is truly different. They're thinking more with their amygdala, meaning like they're making emotional decisions. They can't really project far out. They have a whole different view of the world than adults do. And then if you add in any ADHD or anxiety or a learning disability, they're dealing with a whole wealth of struggles. And they think differently. They operate differently. And we as adults can't make them use their brains like we use them, because their brains aren't made that way yet. They're not developed to that point yet. And I think sometimes we see teenagers and we think, oh, you're almost 18, you're almost a grown up, you're going to be on your own, like you've got to get it together. But literally, like, their brain isn't there yet.
Right. But like, I don't even know what that means. Get it together.
Yeah, exactly.
Get what together?
Right.
They're having a good time. They're loving life. They're together.
So do you have, another question I wanted to ask you about that before I move on. You said you break their priorities down into actions. Uh-huh. How many actions do you typically start with? Do you go for all of them, or do you start like fading them in? I fade them in because I work with ADHD teens.
Like 3, because I really want to, like, I feel like there's a buffet and we all want to take our plate there and we want to fill it all up, and then we get overly excited, and when we create goals, we have actions. If it's too many, then of course it's just not even satisfying either. Like, you have to dig down to here to get this food and this food. So I like to just say 3, like, and even as they start to get really confident and start really keeping those commitments to themselves, I still just say, like, what are the top 3 things you can do to show that that's a commitment? So if you say it is to go to college, then it's like, are you, homework, maybe it's either like an extracurricular or applying for scholarship. And then maybe it's just going to be researching colleges. And so those are like the 3 things they're going to do that week, or even the month or the year, just whatever, wherever you define your goal time period, and just focus on those 3 things. And then that way at the end of each day and the end of each week, they can say, did I do it? They can check in. Yeah, I did those 3 things. Perfect. That's totally showing it's a priority for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. I usually have them start with 1 because often my kids are really struggling, and just start with 1 thing they can do like right now,
Right.
literally right now while I'm in this meeting with them. Right.
Yeah.
And then we build from there and we start stacking. And then once they're confident with those and consistent, then I suggest, okay, now if you want to add like 2 or 3 little ones, go for it, because they already have the self-trust. But
Right.
we're still like so similar. This is fascinating. Um, so now I forgot the other question I was going to ask you. What about time scheduling? Like, how do you have them figure out when they're going to do this stuff?
Okay, so yeah, this is a big one for me. And what it is so the main thing I even do before we get started is I really help them focus that our thoughts create our feelings. And so what I mean by that is like, so for me, I have the thought that I have plenty of time to do everything that I prioritize. And that thought has really served me well. But most people just naturally have these thoughts like there's not enough time, or time is running out, or they think I'm always wasting time. But those are the type of thoughts that make us feel like anxious or stressed out or hopeless or exhausted. So when we feel those feelings, anxious and stressed out, we aren't very motivated to like keep working. So we don't usually take action when we feel that way. And that's when we just completely stop working. And so the first thing I do, even before we kind of work on time, is just discover what they think about time, or whatever it is that they're working on. What do they think about schedules? A lot of people are afraid to create schedules, especially that ADHD brain. It really makes them feel like they're going to be have to honed into it, and they're going to have to really like be scheduled by it. And they want that freedom, so they feel very limited. So we just really figure out what their thoughts are around that. But if you wake up in the first thing in the morning and you're able to say like, I have so much to do today, or it's going to be totally crazy, I'm not going to get everything done, or I'm not going to be able to do anything I want to do, then those are the thoughts that will motivate us and encourage us to not take the action. That will really, so what I do is just kind of figure out what is keeping them from wanting to take the action, whether it's scheduling your time or whatever we're working on, and then really developing better feelings and better thoughts about that. And then what we do is then once they kind of have realized, okay, I can see the benefit of this, I'm ready to start thinking like I want to think I have enough time. They don't even have to think that they do and be whimsical like me. Like I just totally know I will, but they may not be there yet. But then we actually create time to create a schedule, right? You have to plan it. So it's not a new concept, right? But many people aren't doing it. So I take them through committing to schedule out your day, whether that's the night before, the morning of, whether you're scheduling out your week on a Sunday or a Monday morning. But productive people plan like what they're going to do, and they reach their goals and they stick to their plans. And so if we don't have any plans for that day, then where's the motivation coming, to really see that goal through? And as you mentioned, you talked about, is it the amygdala? Is that how you said it? I call it like the lower brain and the higher brain. So when we're planning or pre-planning, it's our higher brain. It's the brain that wants the best for us. It's the brain that wants us to succeed things in life. That's the part that is using the pre-planning. That's the part it's coming from. And then of course, when we're in the action in the day, it's that lower brain, or that monkey brain, is what I call it, that's going to try to talk you out of the plan. And so what we do is I just help them practice honoring their plan. And that takes time, right? Just like any other skill that you want to develop. It takes time, it takes confidence. But the more often you do it, and the more willing you do it, you're going to create those feelings that I mentioned that drive the motivation. So you start to create those confident feelings. You're like, I can do it. Like, when they just do one little thing, they get really excited, and I can do that. And then that's the feeling that continues to perpetuate them through to allow them to just keep working on their goals and getting stuff done.
Yeah. Do you ever work with clients that when they've made their time blocks or their plan, whatever you want to call it, really struggle to stick with it? So I have a bunch of students who I end up working with who tend towards perfectionism, and it's, though they really like the making the plan, they really struggle to stick with it. And do you have any suggestions around that?
Yeah, so lots of times, like two things, like my brain is spinning. I'm like, oh, which one should I say first? So a lot of times it's just realizing the obstacles that are getting in the way. So sometimes the ADHD brain has a lot of ideas and they're going to do da 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 da, right? And this plan is so huge. So the first thing we do is really simplify the plan, right? Bring it back to like what really can be accomplished. And even though maybe the plan could be beefed up, I really just kind of keep it super simple for a while, right? So just they can just practice honoring that plan. But then even if it's simplified, let's say, and they're not doing that, we really just talk about urges and like really kind of deciding like, of course, we're not going to want to do it when it comes, but how much better it feels when we do. And then when they really tap into that feeling or get something done, I really have them sit there and celebrate in that feeling. Because especially that perfectionist brain, they're just expecting, so either they don't do it right because they want it to be really good, or they do it, but then they don't sit in that like, oh my gosh, I did it. That was amazing. Like, I totally got something done on time. They're just like, oh, well, that's what I was supposed to do, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And so just really sitting in that time and recognizing what they did do is really helpful. And then sometimes just figuring out accountability. Like, I don't want them to be accountable to a coach for the rest of their lives, but I really have found that it's super successful for people that are struggling to stay committed to have an accountability piece. And so I help them kind of figure out what would make you feel like you needed to get it done. I don't want to create that all the time where they feel like they have someone behind them, like pushing them along, but I want to create that feeling of accomplishment. So eventually what we're hoping is that cool feeling, that intrinsic feeling that they're feeling, is something that will drive them, and the accountability piece can drop off.
Yeah. I like to use the extrinsic to then develop and drive the intrinsic.
Yeah,
for sure. I have a lot of students who will sit down and work 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 and not stop, because of the perfectionism piece or the hyper-focus piece, or, whatever might be going on. And I think that's a real challenge sometimes, because they want it to be so perfect, or they're so into it, they don't want to stop, even though they have 4 more things to do and, 1 hour left to do it in.
Right. And so I just, when that is the case, stumbling over my words, I just like to encourage them to set their goals by results. So not like do my math homework or whatever it is, but finish problems 1 through 12. That's probably not the best example, but do you see how it's just like, if they have a big assignment, let's just say, and they're doing this big assignment, it's just like finish the outline or finish the first introduction paragraph, but it's result based. So from like, let's say 1 to 2, I'm going to, and instead of just saying work on my history project, it's going to say finish my outline and start the introduction paragraph.
Yeah.
And then that gives them that stop time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, when it's 1, you've done, so they know how much time they have to do it. They do it, they get it done. And then they get to feel that sense of satisfaction. I'm making up words.
Satisfaction.
Really satisfied. Yeah. In that, because when you're that perfectionist brain, sometimes if you don't chunk it up in that way, you're say it again. Why can't I say that word?
Satisfied?
I'm trying
satisfaction?
Yes. Your satisfaction, then it really isn't until you hit the end. And like a lot of people, we need a little more like cheerleading on the way. And so it's kind of like, if you chunk it up, like finish your outline, finish the first paper, finish the 10 pages, edit it, right? You can celebrate at each one of those things. Yeah. And then that allows you to really get that feeling that you want more often. And then when it's done, you can get to feel satisfied because you've kind of been doing it all the way along.
Yeah. And I'm just going to re-stress what you already did. Experience that satisfaction. Like, you just did that. You really did. Yeah, sure. It was expected and it's easy for you to brush it off, but you did it. Like, you said you were going to do it and you did it. That's the accomplishment right there. Not that your teacher wanted you to turn it in or your mom and dad wanted you to get the room to be finished. It's, you said you were going to do it. You did it. Now you get to celebrate because you set that expectation for yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what words of wisdom would you have for parents who might be struggling with their, monkey brain teenagers?
All right. Do you have time for this? Because this is probably where I could go forever. So just stop me, say you've heard enough. But the first thing is just patience, kindness, compassion, and forgiveness. And also for ourselves too, right? So for them and for ourselves, because lots of times we don't display that. You kind of talked about how we show up. So as a parent, of course, we're expected to guide and direct our children. We can make requests of them, but ultimately, as we talked about, like we don't know what's best for them. Like we have an idea, right? We think that they need to get a good enough grades, or we think they need to get enough rest, or be kind, or stay away from like those substances that are habitual. But when they aren't doing those things, when they aren't doing the things that we think that they should or shouldn't be doing, then we often get angry or we get upset. We might get judgmental, right? And then, as you mentioned, that causes tension, and that causes a whole nother set of problems too. So when we don't show up with our teen with like patience and that compassion, whether if we're like very demanding and we're nagging, right, then the relationship suffers. So it's hard to be the example for them, for like what we hope to them to, you know, be that model for them to get to do, when we're yelling at them, when we're constantly judging their actions, and when we're arguing with them. So for parents, I like to remind them to just look at the bigger picture of the result that you want for your teen, and not like those daily choices that they're doing that maybe you're considering them to not be very wise. Because I think for most parents, it might be safe to say that the result we want is to just love them, right? To be there for them, to support them, to have a relationship with them. And so if we're constantly focusing on the things that they aren't doing, that we think that they should be doing, then, as I mentioned, the relationship suffers, and so do the results for you being there to support them, you being like that safe place to fall, that being that non-judgmental supporting parent. So we need to just focus on loving our teen for who they are, rather than trying to change them or fight against who, you know, we want them to be. And I know I say this with all confidence, but I know how hard it is. Because, you know, again, I have the teen with the OCD, the ADHD, and the ODD. And so some of her qualities as a younger child, and even now, they really drove me nuts, right? It seemed to be those qualities that were, I would say, were hard to parent. But those are like the same qualities that I want for her in her adult life. And I try to remind myself of that often. So for example, she's very persistent, right? She's like always asking for stuff and just over and over and over. But like as an adult, that's what I want for her, right? Is to be able to make those requests of her needs. I tend to tell myself sometimes that she's constantly thinking her way out of everything, like, right, trying to figure out how to get out of it. But as an adult, that shows up as being like questioning, within a questioning mind, right? It's always thinking of ways that things can be done better or more efficient or with purpose. Right? We tend to think that sometimes these teens are very opinionated, or they're like constantly telling us what to do or what they're not going to do. But as an adult, that's like a leader, and that's someone with confidence. And I just remember, like, think about the toddlers. We have some 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds across the street, and she like put her arms across like her stuff, and she's like, "No, Mom, I do myself," you know, like that. And I just think, oh, like, how frustrating, right? When you're in a hurry and they're 3 and they want to like buckle themselves. But like, that's independence, right? That's confidence. And that's someone that's willing to try and make mistakes. So just remember, like, some of those things that they're doing that might be difficult or you seem hard to parenting, those are really what you want for your teens when they get to be an adult, right? We want that independence, the confidence, the willing to make requests.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times, sorry, totally cut you off.
No,
as parents and as teachers, and, you know, just the conventional system of our culture, we often like breed out the qualities that we want to see in our best and brightest and most creative minds. Like the people who get things done in life as adults often pushed the mold when they were kids, either not doing well in school or thought about things differently or did things differently. And I feel like we almost tend to stamp that out in kids. And then as adults, the lucky ones rediscover it. But the whole time in their childhood, they're like getting punished for it.
Right. Like I think back at that toddler and you're like, no, you can't do it yourself. Hurry up. I'll just do it. And then all of a sudden we're like, they're a teenager and we're like, do it yourself. And you're like,
why aren't you changing the toilet paper roll? Why aren't you doing the laundry?
Yeah, why can't you do it yourself? Right. Right. But also, like, I'm not suggesting is sometimes when we talk about this, parents think that we're just letting the kids do whatever they want. Right. I think that it's really important to talk with them about their choices and to encourage them to do things that you think would be beneficial for them, and to maybe just make requests, right? And punishments and whatever, you know, they need to still as children, follow like some of those family rules, you know, like I mean, at least we request that they do. They get to make their choices. But what I want parents to really feel like the need to really, I don't know what the right word is, but just really like analyze, like, is the things we think they should be doing and they're not doing, is it worth like having a relationship suffer with that child, right? So if we think they need to get straight A's or go to bed at 10:30 or finish their assignments on time, right, or whatever, in some cases it will be worth it, you know, that you really want to enforce those rules or to make those requests and even maybe give out consequences if needed. But there will be sometimes that you might decide that the relationship with your teen is more important than these things that you think that they should be doing. And so like when the teens act out and when they don't follow the rules, also don't take it as like this personal attack on our abilities as like a parent, right? Because this teenager of mine that I was telling you, like I used to honestly, seriously lay in bed at night and be like, does she stay up at night and think, what can I do to really piss mom off to tomorrow? Like, and I decided I'm not going to give myself that much credit. She's literally not thinking about me, right? She's a teen. They're thinking about their desires. She's thinking about her wants, how she can easily get it. She's thinking about what would be fun tomorrow. She's really not thinking about me and annoying me or anger. And of course, she can't do any of those things. It's my thoughts about her, right? But like, they're not thinking about other people really, right, in the way to be despiteful or vengeful very often. They're just thinking about, hey, how can I get instant gratification? What can be fun for me? And, you know, we do this too as adults. And we don't stay up at night thinking, what can I do to really make my teen angry tomorrow, right? We're just like, how can I help them best? And then that best is how do we want to show up? Is it angry and frustrated and mad? Or is it, you know, compassion, kindness, and understanding and wondering why they're doing what they're doing?
Yeah, I ask my own kids, and they're little, they're 3 and 5, and my clients a lot, like, is what you're doing right now helping you? You know, if my little one is whining and whining and whining because she wants more butter on her bread, because that's her thing, she likes butter, and she's whining about it, and it goes on for a while, I'll look at her and say, is this helping you to get what you want? And, you know, that's usually enough to make her stop and think, even at 5 years old, stop and think like, oh, wait, this is not how I communicate my needs. But yet I'm not the one telling her to stop whining or what she should do. I'm just asking her to reflect, is your behavior getting you what you want? A lot of times when my teens are kind of going into victim mode, because it happens and we do it too, right? Where, you know, my teacher, yada, 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 yada.
Always the
And
teacher, right?
yeah. And quite frankly, a lot of the times it is, but still I reflect that back to them is this helping you to accomplish the goal? If not, what would help you? Because sitting there complaining about it isn't going to help. So what do we need to do? I don't phrase that to them, but what do you need to do that will help you? If there is a teacher communication issue, which often there is, how can we fix this problem so that you can keep moving forward?
Right. And I think as parents, it's really awesome to not validate the feeling, but validate what you're hearing, you know, like, oh,
Right.
I hear, you know, that you're having a hard time with your teacher, and then kind of go into what you said, because a lot of times you want to say more of that, like, well, then how can you solve it? Which is kind of what you're saying is like, yeah, teachers are human too, and they may make mistakes or make it hard for you. But instead, if we don't just at least validate, okay, I understand that you're having a hard time with your teacher. I understand that your teacher's stupid. Then it didn't matter what we say after that, because they think that we just jump to, it's your fault, you need to fix it. And so just kind of really validating that not the emotion, but just the feeling, like, because they can feel how they want to feel, and just validate, I see that you're frustrated. I see that you're upset.
Like, yeah. And a lot of times they have valid points. And we do want to validate that. I mean, okay, sometimes they don't, but like, I see what goes on at school and behind the scenes and whatever. And a lot of time the complaints are stemming from a true problem. It's just, you know, a reasonably solvable.
Yeah, well, maybe the teacher didn't explain it very well, and but instead it shows up as the teacher's so dumb she never knows what she's saying when she talks.
Right.
Okay, well,
right.
Really? And, you know what I mean? But like, what are the facts? She gave an assignment, you know, I'm not quite sure what she wants me to do. Okay, those are the facts. You know, like, we don't need to sit on she's dumb and doesn't explain well.
Right.
That doesn't help you solve.
Exactly. And as adults, I think in helping the teens, it becomes easy for us to say like, oh no, I'm sure the teacher was right, or I'm sure, you know, it's a problem with you, teen. So I think that validation piece is really important. And then okay, now what?
Right.
You know, what do
You
we
don't
do
have
now?
to validate that they were right or wrong. Just like, okay, you're frustrated with your teacher, or you don't feel like your teacher gave you the directions right.
Yeah.
What can you do so that you can accomplish your goal?
Yeah. And I think what you just said right there in the not establishing right or wrong, like we're not judging the feelings. We're hearing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The kids feel heard. So we've been going on, any last words of advice? I mean, I have a feeling you and I could talk for forever, so I won't do that to the people listening.
Yeah, no, I just think, you know, just hang in there, because as you mentioned, the entrepreneur brain, there's like 60% to 100, whatever. Just hang in there, because there are bright, educated brains. This is for the parent and for the teen. You parents, you have an amazing, bright teen. Teen, you're an amazing, bright, creative brain. And we just need to figure out how to best, like, propel that brain forward. You know, just like I think about a certain car, they take different gasolines, and one is better than another, but one might work, but it just may not work as bad. Like, it's almost like fueling you with the right gasoline, for lack of better words, to really propel you forward, and to not get frustrated on either end, for the parent or the adult, when things aren't, maybe the parent or the child, I guess, they're not the same, you know, like, I lost my train of thought, but just like, if we don't have those expectations as the parent or the adult, and we just really make sure that we are just propelling and fulfilling and fueling with the right stuff to get the results that we want.
Yeah, what I'm most walking away with this is, think about what you want as a grown-up. Think about what you want with your relationship with your child, and make sure that your actions are fueling that relationship. And if that means that a homework assignment doesn't get done on time, it doesn't get done on time. You know,
Right. Because what's going to
where
make the difference in 5 years, right? You know,
right.
like,
Where can people find you? I can hear a lot of moms listening to this and being like, oh my gosh, this lady is the answer to my, you know, life prayers.
so I hang out on Instagram most often, and I'm organized with an ED, so organizedlife.coach. I also am on Facebook, if that's more your thing. That's at Ceri Payne Coaching. And then just my website is the same, organized with the ED life.coach. And so that's where I'm at. If you go to my Instagram, I have done a few podcasts, guest appearances, not all of them on ADHD, but most of them on scheduling and time management and things of that nature, that are definitely fuel anyone, whether you have ADHD or not. And so you can check out some of those on my Instagram page as well.
Yeah, I always say that things in like the ADHD and the special ed world are really just examples of good teaching and good life habits.
Yes. For example, yes, you nailed it.
Yeah. So thank you. Do you offer any like, I don't know, free coaching calls or like connection calls or anything?
I do. Yeah. So if you go to my Instagram and you go to the link in my bio, like I said, there's a bunch of podcasts, but there's also a free 55-minute consult session. So thanks for asking for that. And so you can click on that. Also in my bio, I have like 24 simple ways to save 24 simple ways to save 24 hours each month. And it just talks about batching and thinking about things differently. So that's really great. More geared towards the adult, more so than the child. And then let's see. Oh, I currently have a quarantine like approved like service idea that really hits on academics. So it's ways that you can involve your kids in some service ideas, but also kind of hit their academics. And they're more hands-on and kind of fun and creative. And so that would be really good for that child that is so sick of the Zoom calls and sitting and doing their work. These are some of those things that you can really get up and around and more hands-on. And they're, you know, quarantine approved as far as like they keep the social distancing. So those are a couple of freebies that I currently have right now. Plus, as I said, the free 55-minute session with me, so we can just kind of discover where your priorities are, where you're lacking, and kind of give you some actionable steps to move on and just start making the life that you want for yourself.
Well, thank you so much for your time and being here. And I really appreciate it. I think there was a lot of value you gave everybody today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Yeah.